Susan is the Lead Hazard Reduction Program Manager for DHCD. She's been with DHCD for 7 years and previously worked for the Weatherization Assistance Program. Her why is about making homes healthy, safe, and efficient.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you all today talking about the Lead Hazard Reduction Program. It's great to have this audience of people working with our Homebuyer programs and also CDBG. So I'm going to be speaking to all of you today about the benefits of the program, and hopefully you'll learn more about the mechanics and how we can continue to roll this out to the community. Thank you, Kirsten, for flipping my slides in advance. I'll start by quickly introducing, you heard about me, and then my colleague, Michelle Selden, is our program administrator on the program, and she and I are always here to answer questions for you. We did our first job in the summer of 2022. Thank you, Southside Outreach Group. And since then, we've completed about 90 jobs. So we're on our way and looking to partner with you all to keep doing more. So in the spirit of our why are we here today talking about lead hazards? Why are we addressing lead hazards? Why do they matter? And feel free to shout it out or put it in the chat. Maybe the chat's a little easier. You might have seen one sneak preview, which is kids, right? Anybody have kids in their lives who are under the age of 6? I do. That's probably why my why with all this is almost overpowering, because I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. So I see those, this work in their faces every day. So yes, thank you, Vaughn. Health and safety, especially for children. You'll hear a lot about this, children under 6, and they really are the most impacted by lead poisoning that they unfortunately would carry with them for their whole lives. So that's why you're here. So think of that little one in your life while we're going through the program today. What other benefits does LHR have? Why should we leverage it? Why should we tell our DPA clients about it? Well, if you see that window in the middle, LHR can pay for window replacements. When we find a lead hazard, we can address that component. So it can help really with those housing rehab projects that you might have underway. For that client that's just purchased a home, if they have lead-based paint on their windows, they might be eligible to be replaced under this program. So be thinking about that. And thank you. Yes, cleaning up the environment, money, money, money. Look at this picture of people stretching dollars. We'll hear farther along in my presentation about how people have used LHR to make their CDBG dollars go farther. So there are lots and lots of benefits. And today, I really want people to also focus on, you are the change makers, you are the decision makers, you are in the control seat. It's your decisions here that really impact kids, impact our houses, your decision to leverage these dollars. So thank you for that. Thank you for listening to this, and thank you for using them in the future. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So what are the first steps? Let's talk about eligibility. So 1978, we all, I think, have that year tattooed on our arm somewhere. We know it's the year that lead was banned for residential use. So for a home to qualify in the sort of first phase of eligibility for LHR, it needs to be built before 1978. And then 80% AMI, that should be a very familiar threshold for everyone. It's our threshold here for LHR, and that's great news. If you're qualifying for CDBG, income-wise, you will qualify for LHR. Same with other programs too. Now, this is where I want to get in a little bit of the weeds with eligibility. So I'm going to talk about owner-occupied homes and those requirements. So if the client owns their home, they must have that young child either living at home or visiting often. Please keep that visiting child eligibility point in mind, because maybe it's a senior couple and they've got a little grandson who comes over a couple times a week. Well, boom, their home is automatically qualified for some really wonderful benefits. So please, please, please ask your clients if they have young folks visiting. Some of our clients might even take it for granted that their family is over so often that they might even not think about that as a visiting component. So please bring that up with your clients because we qualify a lot of people that way. Also, a pregnant woman residing at home would qualify just the owner occupied. Now, what about rental properties? Guess what? You don't need a child there. So we've done quite a few CDBG projects on investor-owned properties where that child is not required. So that's the big takeaway I want you to have from this slide. If it's an investor-owned property, you don't need a child. You just need that pre-78 house and that 80% AMI to move forward with getting the home tested as the first stage. And that's really where a lot of our projects might be qualifying with CDBG. But then, if it is that owner, we go back to that young child. So please keep that in mind. Other questions we get, we can do multifamily. Keep that in mind. Sometimes people really do get focused on the health aspect and think we have to have a child who has been poisoned by lead, that we have to have that elevated blood lead level to serve the home. We don't. We certainly want to serve the home before that happens. That's the ideal. So those are some of the misnomers about eligibility I wanted to clear up today. And you can always ask me and Michelle if you have questions about whether your client might qualify. And you can go ahead, Kristen. Thank you. So what are the next first steps? Okay, so we qualified the client, which I know is no small order. So that's huge. And they qualify for LHR. Great. In that they live in a pre-78 house and they have that income and household eligibility. So now we're going to order the lead inspection risk assessment. And I say that word all the time. We call it a LIRA, which is kind of a cute name for it. But does anybody want to put in the chat what a lead inspection risk assessment is? Because it's a twofold process. Anyone have one done before through their program? The inspection part is a surface by surface inspection of the paint. So we determine whether it contains lead-based paint and whether, and the shape the paint that's in, whether it's intact or deteriorated. And then, thank you, Nikki, the outside too. Exactly. That is the risk assessment part. So we would, well, yes, outside paint would be part of the inspection, and the risk assessment would take care of soil outside, dust hazards to determine what the risks are. So it's a nice combo report that gives you the full snapshot into the condition of the paint, because we're really most concerned about paint that is deteriorated. Actually, intact lead-based paint, our program is not designed to touch, which is confusing for some people. I believe Ellen Smith, you and I had a case like that you brought to me, which was awesome. It was an IPR, I believe, case that you were hoping to leverage LHR on. And unfortunately, the lead-based paint was intact. It was on the soffit, so we couldn't serve it. It's funny when you get, it's funny the mixed emotions I have, like wanting to find hazards. It should be good that there are no hazards, but of course we also want to help people. So it's a mixed bag of feelings there. But yes, the report will show whether it's intact or not. And if it's intact, it's not doing us harm. It's really that deteriorated lead-based paint that's going to create that dust. And that's what we're most worried about as well. And then the dust samples in the home will further tell that story. So what if we don't have any hazards? Well, like I said, sometimes that is a good thing. Not if we're looking for more money, but it's good, obviously, for the occupants. That means if there is lead-based paint, it's not harming them, or maybe there's no lead at all. And we're happy to find that out. And we will absolutely pay for the assessment if there is no lead. I get that question a lot. Jeffredo Granger, his project's portfolio in Bedford, he called me up. He said, hey, I have like a 1976 house, but it meets the requirements. And it's like, let's test it. So we tested it. They didn't have any lead. That's okay. Now he knows, the client knows, And it's just great to have that information. But if we do find lead hazards, then the good news is that we have money. We have money to address them. So that's the next piece. And what I'll go into next with the presentation is, what do we do now? We got our report back and there are hazards. So Kristen, thank you. You can flip. So depending on what the report reveals, we can address a variety of things. So if we find deteriorated lead-based paint on windows, on doors, on baseboards, we can absolutely replace the windows in their entirety, either replace the doors or scrape and repaint, whatever makes the most sense. We've done siding repair and replacement. If there's lead in the soil, we will dig out the first 6 inches of topsoil and replace it with new. Our lead program can also come with some healthy homes repairs, which we make eligible on a case-by-case basis, depending on our grantees' sort of cash flow needs. Typically, we reserve them for our standalone jobs where we're only addressing lead and we haven't been braiding them with CDBG. But on a case-by-case basis, we can incorporate it with CDBG. So if you're looking at your big work scope and thinking, gosh, this is a long list, where can we leverage some other funding? If there's lead on it, deteriorated lead-based paint on it, we can fix it with LHR, pay for it with LHR. One common question I get is, well, will you pay just to take out the windows, but will you pay for the new windows and putting those back in? Absolutely. It's not just a rip it out and move on. We'll pay for the new component to come back in as well. Thank you, Kristen. Next slide. Now, bear with me. I'll let your eyes adjust to this, and you're going to follow it left to right, down, back to the left side, down, back to the right. And so this is a project job flow. And again, we're going to go back to our why, because yes, there are steps we have to undertake like we do with any of our programs. And I wanted to sort of break it down in a little job flow process so you can get a sense of how it flows. So we've already talked about some of those early steps with determining eligibility, ordering that risk assessment. You've signed a grant agreement with us at DHCD, a separate one for LHR. And now you're ready to prepare your lead scope of work. Okay, so I know that I've got baseboards in the living room that need work. I know the whole porch is just lead paint peeling everywhere off the columns. I know my windows just are shoddy and they're full of lead and let's replace them. So you write all of that up. And the person who needs to write that up needs to be a licensed lead risk assessor. That's a pretty major credential to note. I know many of our rehab specialists, I think all of you are risk assessors, but then, you know, in case you don't have access to that, we can talk about an environmental services firm serving in that role for you. But just really wanted to highlight the credentials needed to write that scope of work. And then with all your experience, we need to incorporate that into your greater rehab and really determine the timing and the sequencing between the lead work and the greater rehab work you're accomplishing in the house. And it might work best for you to go in and remediate the lead. If you're doing a combination of abatement and interim controls, you're abating by removing the windows, but it's interim controls where you're scraping the porch columns and repainting them. Same with the baseboards, likely painting, scraping and repainting. So then you want to make sure any work you're doing subsequently wouldn't disturb any lead you've remediated. Otherwise, you want to do the lead on the back end. And as with many of your other projects, DHR review is involved, completing the environmental review. Some of our partners have had a success bidding jobs out to a prime contractor who then subs out to a lead abatement contractor. So that's one model you can look to depending on, again, how your sequencing is going. But it really is useful to have the client out of the house for the whole duration and not say, take care of lead, move them out, move them back in, then start CDBG later, for example. We certainly want to displace people as little and for as short a time as possible. Please talk to me. You'll see a couple of red arrows. This is when I really want to be involved. So make sure we talk about the scope of work, and also before you award the project, I'd like to hear about those bids and where we've landed. And then you'll see the project sequences is down, sequences. The client is relocated, the project begins. Everything goes extremely well, extremely smoothly, as they do. Clearance testing, don't be alarmed if your project fails once or twice or 3 times, it can happen. And we will pay for 1 to 2 of those clearances, and we would encourage your contractor in your agreement with your contractor that they will be paying anything above that. So that certainly wouldn't be out of your pocket. And once that home clears, and of course you're done with any other greater work you're doing, then that client can return home. So we have some of our partners have undertaken this already, completed jobs, worked out some of these kinks for you. So I'm sure they would be available if you wanted to run this job flow process through with any of your peers as well. But we found it working, which is great. It's no longer just a theory I was presenting to you all on in the last couple of years. So now it's got legs. Thank you, Kirsten. We'll flip to the next slide. And these are our allowable costs as related to CDBG and IPR. So just limited to those programs. If you have questions about leveraging LHR with anything else, please let me know. I think the big thing to note is the lead admin. So if you're leveraging with CDBG, you get that extra $5,000 in administrative expenses, which would be shared between the project management and the rehab specialist for their work. Clearance testing is a separate thing to bill us for, though, so you don't need to include the rehab specialist's time in that $5,000 for clearance testing because we pay for that separately. You'll see $24,000 for lead remediation as a cost average. We will pay higher than that. So we certainly want to look at our bids, but we don't walk away from lead hazards. We don't do half the house and that's it. So that is just a number of averages to work off of. And I think everything else on here is self-explanatory. So I did ask Southside PDC shamelessly for a quote I could use in the presentation, because I do think hearing from your peers and colleagues is more helpful sometimes than hearing from me about the benefits. So I'll let you read what they said about the South Boston project and how it benefited the project and stretched the dollars. I also listed some of our other localities who've either completed projects or in the early stages of just testing some houses to see if they'll use LHR, and show you where we're going. And I'm really proud. You know, this was just a theory. This was something we hoped would work a couple of years ago, and you all are out there doing it. So thank you for being those early adopters and taking this money and putting it in your communities. And then we can go, I have a couple of pictures to share in the next slide. This is also out of Southside PDC. This is a project in Broadnex that also leveraged LHR dollars. It was, and these are 2 investor-owned properties, but there is a young child who I think is around 2 or younger who spends time in between both of them. So it was great to get those windows replaced. So we did windows, doors, some exterior work. This was about $1 million project overall, and they needed about an extra $67,000 in additional cost, and LHR covered about 48 of that between their 4 projects. So just some real life examples and real life numbers of how LHR has helped with some CDBG projects. Thank you. And please, you know, for those working with new home buyers, this is a great resource for them to know about. Please share this information with those clients, because some incredible benefit can be done to their homes. Do we have any questions? Please ask anything. I just came back. I was in Minneapolis last week for thank you, Kathy, I can. Healthy Home Supplemental. Anyway, I was at a conference last week and I over asked. I realized the more you know, I think the more questions you have. The first time I attended the conference, I didn't have any questions, and now I have thousands. Okay, so Healthy Home Supplemental is activated when we are using LHR funds on a house and there's some additional activities that would make the home healthier. We could bring in this smaller pot of money of about less than $5,000. So if you do find asbestos or have a wiring issue, a plumbing leak, the spirit of them is to be used in conjunction with the LHR work. So I've got to fix this roof leak to protect the paint job I just did inside the house. That was really where they originated from. But then they became broader to include HUD's healthy homes checklist and incorporate all of those. I think it's 29 points on their list of potential home health hazards. So we can do trip, fall hazards, etc. And like I said, we can activate it with CDBG. We're not given, the amount of money we're given is not enough to cover every home that we would do under the grant. So that's why we can be a little close with it if a grantee has other money to leverage, but certainly we can talk about that more on a case-by-case basis. How do they apply? What a great question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. So if it's a client with CDBG, we're just using your CDBG application that you've already filled out and kind of running with that process, making sure there isn't some extra LHR supporting documentation, such as the child verification that should go along with that. But then if they're interested, say a DPA client, then I'd say ask them to reach out to me and Michelle Selden, depending on where they are in the state. We have Project Homes that serves the Richmond area as our direct program provider. SIRCAP serves our kind of greater Roanoke, try to keep them within a 1-hour radius, say, of Roanoke. We have Southside Outreach Group. They're kind of our main providers right now. And then I have other environmental services firms who can serve clients throughout the state. We are statewide. So that's all to say, send them to us first and we'll determine which provider is the best one to send them to. So the max amount paid per home. I know that's a great question. Right now, we have a good amount of funding. So we don't have a max. And actually, I came back from my HUD conference last week where they said, does HUD have a cap? No, they made us repeat it. No, there is no cap. So the answer is there is no cap, which isn't that great and kind of scary something to say out loud. So we have spent $100,000 on lead on a house before. Believe it or not, that number isn't a scary number. Most of our jobs tend to be more in the 20-ish range, I'll say, but we're not afraid of the high cost ones because it just costs a lot to remediate lead, and we've seen those prices go up like everything in the last few years. That's a great question, Megan, about verifying that the child is visiting at home. We have a self-verification form where the client lists the child's name and birth date and the address, their primary address, and sign the form. That's really all the documentation they need. And yes, Sherry, absolutely. Actually, SIRCAP, not to put you all on the spot like we keep doing, is going to be leveraging lead with ARS, which I'm very excited about. So stay tuned, everybody. Maybe we can report on that next year. But they might be our first, I think, ARS house. And absolutely, we can use lead with ARS. And I would love to see more of that because I know your homes are going to young families. So it's perfect. Take advantage of our extra money, please. I can walk you through the extra paperwork. It's not that bad and it's worth it. Great. Oh, Ellen, sorry, I'm reading the chat. Thank you all so much. Please, please, please remember this funding source. It's an incredibly valuable resource. It does incredible work. It, is literally saving lives. That's my why. So please, please, please continue to leverage it. Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you, Susan. Yes, it is incredible. I've seen some videos on the befores and afters and the difference it makes, and it's just amazing. We are not taking a break between this session and the next session, so I'm going to stop the recording on this one so that they can be individual on the website.